The northern neck of Virginia has always been defined by the water that surrounds it. The Rappahannock River to the south, the Potomac River to the north. The English explorer Captain John Smith called it a place where heaven and earth never agreed better to frame man's habitation. George Washington called it simply the Garden of Virginia. It is here in Lancaster County that Christ Church was built, a historic landmark that has been called one of the most important structures in America. The significance of Christ Church is not because of any great historical event. No battle was won or lost on church grounds. No document critical to the birth of the nation was signed here. No one famous is known to have worshipped in these pews. What continues to make the church significant is the strength of its architectural character. Finished in 1735, far away from any city, in a colony not yet a country, Christ Church embodied the best of architecture as practiced in England at the time. This rural church has the characteristics of Georgian architecture: symmetry, design flourishes in the roof, intricate brickwork around its doors and windows, and an emphasis on both scale and light. With the exception of minor details, the church remains today as it came from the hands of its builders. While the genius of the design is evident, the identity of these hands has long been lost. What remains extraordinary, however, is that Christ Church was designed to rival anything built in England during the 18th century. The congregation, governed by the Anglican Church and still English at heart, naturally turned to its motherland for architectural inspiration. Some of the church's key elements came from England, including stone from the Isle of Purbeck used to make the church floor. But remarkably, the craftsmen who built Christ Church were talented artisans who carved extraordinarily fine bricks, equal to any made in England. The stone detailing that surrounds each of the windows and the curved brickwork above the doors are a testament to this fine craftsmanship. By the end of the 17th century, the Anglican Church no longer placed a barrier between the priest and the people. The pulpit had moved to the middle of the congregation, and the church was filled with light, not cloaked in darkness. Christ Church's interior conformed to a faith in which the spoken word was paramount. The design and prominence of the triple-deck pulpit, one of only two surviving in Virginia, reflected this new emphasis on the word. Each level was used for a different purpose. A clerk read community announcements from the lower level. The service was delivered from the middle level. The minister gave his sermon from the highest deck. The architectural design of Christ Church reflects the colonial aristocracy, trained to listen and think, more at home with a rational God than a mystical one. Christ Church stands because of the wealth and generosity of Robert King Carter. The Carter legacy began in 1642 when Robert's father, John Carter, acquired land on the northern neck. Prospering as a tobacco planter and shipping merchant, John Carter oversaw construction of the first Christ Church, a wooden structure built near where the brick church stands today. While Carter did not live long enough to see the church completed, his legacy would continue through the generosity of his son Robert, who wrote in 1726, "It is my will, and I do ordain, that whenever the vestry of Christ Church Parish shall undertake to build a brick church, that there be paid out of my estate the sum of £200. While Robert Carter's values were those of other God-fearing men of his time, his wealth was unequaled. At his zenith, he owned 300,000 acres and 1,000 slaves. He raised cattle, hogs, and sheep, and operated 48 tobacco plantations in a dozen Virginia counties. A road lined with tall cedars led from the church to the Carter estate. Today, only the ruins of the estate known as Coratoman survive. Once asked why rich men grow richer, Carter answered, "We are but stewards of God's building. The more he lends us, the larger he expects from us, and happy they that make a right use of their master's talents." Making use of both his wealth and talents, Robert agreed to build the brick church at his own expense, provided always the chancel be preserved as a burial place for my family. But like his father, Robert Carter would not live to see the church he commissioned completed. Buried in 1732, the inscription on his tomb reads, "Provided with extensive wealth worthily acquired, he erected at his own expense this sacred building as a great monument of devoted duty towards God." Robert Carter stood between the old world and the new. Born in America in 1663, he was educated in England. While Robert's father received land from an English king, Robert's son would become a friend of the first American president. Christ Church was a thriving parish. The Reverend John Bell reported to the Bishop of London for the year 1724 that he preached every Sunday and the church was full. During this time, the Church of England was the sole church of the colony of Virginia. The church was more intimately linked with common life than any other institution. Notices and new laws were posted on the doors of churches or read from the lower desk. Sunday services were also a time to become reacquainted with the social life of the community. Church attendance was required by law. Anyone not attending services at least once a month could be brought to the county court for trial. Punishment was a fine of 50 pounds of tobacco or a whipping of 10 lashes. With the Revolutionary War came the disestablishment of the Church of England. During these years, many colonial churches were pillaged. Christ Church escaped the fate of many other churches because it was built with private funds on private land. By 1802, Christ Church was legally declared part of the Carter estate. But the following years were not kind to Christ Church. The building suffered from neglect, and by 1852 it was virtually abandoned as a place of worship. 4 decades later, a local rector wrote, "Many hands have been carrying away the brick from the wall. These fiends in human form have commenced to tear the building to pieces." In 1958, the foundation for historic Christ Church was formed to restore the church. An inspection revealed that the church's structure was remarkably sound, but the plaster walls made of oyster shells, the windows, and some of the interior woodwork needed repair. Through the efforts of many, Christ Church now looks much the same as it did centuries ago. It is the only colonial church in Virginia that still has its original high-backed pews. But the focus here is not just on preservation. The foundation for historic Christ Church is also committed to education and community outreach programs that promote an appreciation of our common heritage. Christ Church was built as a proclamation of faith in God. Not content to serve merely as a reminder of our past, historic Christ Church is a living church with services, ecumenical baptisms, weddings, and funerals. Historic Christ Church remains in its simple yet graceful beauty with almost unamended architectural purity as a living testament to our ancestors' confidence in the future of America.